Hi, this is Jim Musser with Upstream Ministries, and welcome again to Views from Downstream. And this week we're focused on the challenges of change and the need or necessity for change in the local church. And I just want to start and be straight up. I'm really talking to the pastors in the audience today, and change begins with you. And not only does change begin with you, it takes your courage to have the change. And what I mean by this is that you have to, I think, take a different approach than preaching for 30 or 40 minutes and telling some great stories and getting some good laughs and bringing that message that's going to, you think, pierce people's hearts. And look at your role as more of a facilitator in what God is doing in people's lives and wants to do in their lives. And to step away, take the risk to step away from the usual 30, 40-minute message and begin to see your role more as a trainer than a preacher. And the only reason I distinguish that is because we have the idea of what preaching is, and preaching is standing up and having a monologue for 30 or 40, 50 minutes. And I'm not sure that's what New Testament preaching was. It certainly wasn't what Jesus did. Jesus had teaching, but he also, among his disciples, was out training them, in essence, 24/7. And I'm not suggesting you're going to need to do that, but you need to see your preaching as adapting to training. If you continue to do it the same way, where it's just a monologue, as I mentioned several weeks ago, if you're trying to learn a trade, such as carpentry, woodworking, you're not going to just listen to somebody talk about it. You've got to get training in how to use the tools and what they're for, and the types of wood that you're going to use for what project. You have to learn all those things to become a master craftsman. And there's just not much of that going on in the church today. And so start with your preaching. And as I suggested a couple weeks ago, I think, that one way to do that is to shorten your message to like 15 minutes. And then open it up to the congregation, either to ask questions, or even better is to have the congregation talk among themselves, answering questions based on what you've been talking about. Because you need to get your audience actively engaged, not just engage them because you're a dynamic speaker or you have great jokes, but engage them because they're participating, not just sitting there and listening. And we desperately need that in the local church. We have spent way too long in this passive learning model, and it does not work to train disciples. That's just not the way Jesus did it. That's not the way we need to do it. But we have been trained up that way. Notice that word. You have been trained to do it exactly the way you're doing it. You went to a Bible college or Christian college, and you have professors, and they taught you these methods, just as I was taught the same methods. A 3-point sermon, that kind of thing. It's changed a little bit, but they're still recommending this is how you do it. A youth minister is trained to do youth ministry a certain way. A children's pastor is trained to do children's ministry in a certain way. But the question is it the biblical way? Is it along the lines of what we see in the New Testament church? And I think often what we find is it comes way short. And we need to align ourselves again with the New Testament church, which was a very strong community of believers across several continents. And we need to kind of establish that sense of community. And we're struggling to do that. We're a bunch of individuals in many ways, and if you're new in a church, you realize how individualistic we often are. Is you have professional, not professional, but you have dedicated people in your congregation to be greeters. Now, what does that tell you about your church? If you have to have designated people to welcome other people, it's because, in essence, you really don't trust that it's going to happen if there aren't people really welcoming. I would much rather be welcomed by somebody who's sincere about it than this doing it as a job, in a sense, as a task. But we're just not training people that way. And there's just all kinds of aspects of training within the church that we're missing. And it starts with you, the pastor. You set the tone. And if you begin to incorporate training into your sermons and into your worship services, then it can flow out. But the way we're set up right now, if the pastor doesn't want to do that, then it's probably not going to happen. And that's one of the biggest sources of resistance, is pastors really don't want to do this kind of thing because they're afraid that they're going to lose popularity, they're going to lose members, and we just don't want to ask more than what people are willing to give. And yet, people who are following Jesus need to be trained on what that looks like. And that, pastor, is your job and the job of the rest of your staff. And so I'm going to continue this into next week. It's a big topic. And if you have any thoughts, please put those in the comments. And I can handle criticism. I'm a big boy. I can handle it. But I just feel like we need to have an honest discussion, because I just don't see much change in the church over the years. It's more a doubling down on what we've always done, and maybe dressing it up a little bit in different ways, but it's basically still the same model. We need to change it. And on that note, have a great weekend. May you be blessed, and we'll see you on Monday.